Onitsha ụmụ enu amani ekene m unu. Olu n'Igbo ekene m unu. Nke onye chiri nyaze all protocols observed. Ekele m mgbama ka unu ga-anụ onu. I mean to give out very vital information and desired knowledge. Ka unu nụlụ ugolidanda. Ka unu nụlụkwazị uye elo n'ebe. Onitsha ndị dị ndụ na Onitsha ndị nwụrụ anwụ. Denekwanụ. Listen carefully and enjoy yourself.
All right, we're back. So we're gonna get started on the next topic, which is the topic of what is the meaning of Onye Nwe Obodo and Onitsha. To open this topic, I have Chinwoza Kwento, and by his side also will be Ojinaka Ebo, also discussing about this. So Uncle Sylvester, would you like to start for? Hold on. Uncle, you there?
Hello?
Yeah. Uncle Sylvester, would you like to start, or would you like Uncle Jinaka to start? We're
I'm not
shifting
hearing you.
topics.
I think I have a problem here. Let me.
Okay, no problem.
I have a little problem here. Let me.
All right. While we wait for Uncle, I'm just gonna put back the music. So you guys. Yeah, Uncle, you here?
Okay, yeah.
All right. Okay, so we're gonna start discussing the meaning of Onye Nwe Obodo and Onitsha. Uncle Sylvester, you have the floor.
Okay. Onye Nwe Obodo is a very symbolic phrase or concept in our community, Onitsha, because we normally, the Onitsha people normally refer to the king or His Majesty as Onye Nwe Obodo, basically because of his political role, spiritual role, and being perceived by the people as having the final authority in all matters. Is looked upon as the supreme leader, having all the powers in the world, life and death in the community. But that brings us, what is the meaning of Onye? And what is the meaning of Obodo? Which means, Onye means the owner, supreme owner, unchallenged, unquestionable owner. Obodo, that is your community, your land. or your kingdom. If you look at the political structure of Onitsha, where king is at the apex of the kingdom, you hearing me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you find that the king has a very powerful political, spiritual, and religious authority over everybody. That creates an appearance like he's an absolute monarch, but it's not true. But that is the appearance. So hence, the people regard him as Onye Nwe Obodo, the supreme leader, the supreme king, the majesty of Onitsha kingdom. If you look, at the way our political structure was created by our forefathers, you see that the king was and is still today not an absolute monarch, because you find that the Indiche, the Abalanze, the Obonachi Onitsha, the other authorities down the line within the hierarchy, there's a way they check, there's inherent checks and balances among themselves. But on the whole, the king in Onitsha Palace today, called Abogidi, His Majesty Onitsha Kingdom, is still regarded as Onye Nwe Obodo because of the way he's at the apex of our political structure in terms of our society or our kingdom. And another perception again, or there's a particular masquerade called Muafia within the Onitsha masquerade cult, because the masquerade is a cult where we perceive that these were spirits of our ancestors, our ancestral spirits that linked the living and the dead. So if you look at the masquerade cult hierarchy in Onitsha, we have different masquerades. Some of them were just created for dancing, songs, folklores, and entertainment. But this particular Muafia, sometimes they call it the Mmuo Ogonogo or the Long Juju, has supreme position in terms of religious and spiritual authority. It is a spirit. And which means that if Muafia is a spirit, and the king during Onitsha feasts and festivals within the year also communicate with the ancestral spirits, he himself was also, and is still today, regarded as a spirit. So because of these commanding authorities, these two hold in Onitsha, Muafia, which is called Mmuo Ogonogo, and the king's supreme position. In fact, this king, in some quarters, is regarded as a deity and an oracle. That's the king. And they communicate with our ancestral spirits in matters of political, spiritual, and religious. If you look at Onitsha week calendar, 4 days of the week, Oye, Afo, Nkwo, Eke, our feasts and festivals are set by this calendar by His Majesty. And if you look at some of the feasts and festivals like Agachi, Omato, Owewaji, Obalido, Ofala, Osisite, Ikelebeji, Ifejioku. There are some of them like during Ofala or before Ofala, the king goes into seclusion where he will meditate with our ancestral spirits, where they will prepare him ready for the New Yam Festival. So he is the final arbiter, the final authority in the kingdom of Onitsha. So symbolically too, the Mmuo Afia, Mmuo Ogonogo, or the long juju, has the final authority and final arbiter in terms of religious and spiritual. It's unquestionable. You see? And the Mmuo Afia, during burial of a titled Onitsha man, the Mmuo Afia plays very vital role, especially called the Mmuo, who represents the spirit of the deceased, communicates with the dead and the living. And because Onitsha people believe in reincarnation, predestination, and divination, you find that the Mmuo Ogonogo or the Mmuo Afia tell the people when there is an epidemic, there is a problem in the kingdom, a disease epidemic, an upheaval, war, or serious problem in the land. There is this Mmuo Afia communicating with our ancestral spirits. And they have been directed to tell the people what to do. So Mmuo Afia is better as Onye Nwe Obodo because of this vital role, the final authority in terms of spiritual and religious. Likewise, the Igwe himself, the Abogidi, having all the supreme authority in all matters, is regarded as Onye Nwe Obodo. Mmuo Afia also initiate our young boys into the masquerade court, especially during funeral or burial of a titled man. They also initiate prominent women of particular age, as the name mom, who has demonstrated some good level of accomplishment, who has demonstrated prominent role in our kingdom. They are being recognized, which is a privilege. So you find that people will ask the question, is it only the king and the Mmuo Afia should assume this name, Onye Nwe Obodo? Yes, because of their political, religious, and spiritual role being the final arbiter and final authority in all matters in Onitsha. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle, for that information. Very educated. Okay, we're gonna open to the floor for a full discussion. Does anybody have any add-ins or questions? We're talking about Onye Obodo in Onitsha, its significance, its meaning, in regards between the masquerade, Mmuo Ogonogo, and the Obi of Onitsha. If you're just getting in or you didn't really listen, Onye Obodo basically means king spirit and head spirit, and Mmuo Ogonogo means basically is long spirit. It's the tall spirit, and the difference between the two, we're discussing the difference between the two and who really rules as Onye Obodo and Onitsha. So we're gonna open the floor up to anybody who would like to ask any questions or add in any. Okay, do we have any questions or add-ins regarding the current topic of Onye Obodo? Uncle Jinaka, would you like to add in?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Onitsha is a very, very, probably one of the most complex cultures in Igbo land. Very complex, very complex. Um, and we have to realize that Onitsha has also evolved over time. Um, and historically, many of the um, traditional um, symbolic events we have also evolved over time. In the previous section, we were talking about the role of women, and somebody was mentioning about the concept of Omu and the governance or leadership structure of Onitsha and the role of women and all that stuff. Um, Even the concept of Onye Nwe Obodo itself has also evolved over time. Um, but I think Jim also sort of captures sort of the essence. But central to that, you know, um, is it the it's a struggle about power distribution. Um, it's symbolic, but also it means something. Um, so Onitsha really has a very um, balance of power system. Onitsha is probably in many ways more modern in terms of leadership than any society can think of, because these are things that were inbuilt into the system. You know, um, going back years and years and years. But the concept of Onye Nwe Obodo has evolved in terms of power distribution. And some people would even argue that part of Onye Nwe Obodo, beyond the symbolic power structures, even trickled into women's role. Because after all, only two entities can remove the Obi of Onitsha from the throne. Only two entities. One is Mmuo Ogonogo, and one is Igwe Onitsha. And I don't know if anyone remember the history. The last time that an Obi of Onitsha was dethroned in our lifetime, anyway, was when Obi of Ala was dethroned. Obi of Ala actually was dethroned. I don't know if anyone remembers that. He was removed from the throne. Obi of Ala removed from the throne, and the people who did that were women. Onitsha women. Jaga Bolia Iki. That's what they do. That's what they. And he was removed, and they were the ones who also installed him back, right? So, and some people are using that to say, well, if we talk about Onye Nwe Obodo in terms of power structure, women have a share of that concept. Chinwozo is right in terms of the supreme meaning of that, right? But remember, Abogidi cannot remove Mmuo Ogonogo, but Mmuo Ogonogo can remove Abogidi. So symbolically, yeah, but in terms of power structure, it's much more complex than just that. So when we use that name, Onye Nwe Obodo, symbolically to assign to the king, but and he has that supreme name, a supreme power, and it goes with so many things also, that we also call Abogidi, because literally in those days he actually can take a life. He can actually take a life. You can decide that this person is a troublesome person, and they'll take you and go to Ajofia, and then you disappear. So literally, so he has that power. But in terms of power structure and distribution, it gets much more complex than that, because if you begin to ask the question, who has the power, ultimate power to do what, then you realize it's a little bit more complex than that. As I said, Igbo Onitsha were the ones who said to King of Alokabwe, "You're done," and they removed him from power. And for 2 years, he was not the king of Onitsha for 2 years. Ono who ran the Onitsha kingdom for 2 years. When he finally apologized, the women went and brought him back in. Onitsha women went back and brought him back in as king. That happened in my lifetime, and many of you may remember that. So where does that place Onye Nwe Obodo in the concept of power structure? So it's much more complex It's much more symbolically here, but when you get into power structure and who can run the kingdom and balance of power, it gets a little bit more complex than that. So we have to be careful how we talk about it. It's not, there's a symbolic component of that, but it's actually a practical governance power structure of that. So when you begin to think of that, you realize that the power distribution is a little bit more complex in terms of who could do what to whom. So I just want to have people react to that. Chinwoza particularly, I want people to react to what I just said, and I want to see how that fits into what we're talking about. So we have to make a distinction between symbolism and power structure.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Ojina Kadalo. Yes, your observation, like when I was talking, trying to explain that if you look at the kingship position, it looks like he is an absolute monarch. And I remember I said, there are some inherent structures for checks and balances, which, like the women you pointed out, is one of them. Even DJ in Chume, the red cap chiefs, can equally put him on hold, which, like Ojenaka said, boils down on symbolism. The symbolic meaning is absolutism. It has the final. But in reality, it's just like Ibada Mweze, Manasia Eze, Bachalanya, which means Eze cannot do any wrong. Is that correct? But symbolically, according to tradition and custom, you cannot come before the king of Onitsha and tell him direct in his face, you have done wrong, you've committed abomination, you've done this, you've done this. But if the community perceives that this man has gone wrong, he's not living up to his responsibilities, he's incapable of governance, he's not playing his role, the first-class chiefs will tell him in his face, Bachalanyai, there is meaning for that cautionary remark. Bachalanyai, which means, in terms of dethronement, like Ojenaka said, that is part of Onitsha constitution, because when you say constitution, that is oral constitution. That you can dethrone a king by Muafia sitting on his throne, symbolically and in reality. That is dethronement, and it's gonna go. But rarely do Muafia, within our own time, it has not happened. But I know it is a constitutional provision for checks and balances so that this absolutism, absolute authority is curtailed. I think within the wisdom of our forefathers, they created that loophole or that leeway to check a tyrant king. So I think, Ojenaka, I think we are saying the same thing. The only difference is that the word symbolic and realistic authority that is being checked by the other hierarchy is still there in structure.
Okay. We also have Baje Omota on the line as well.
Yes. Daalụkwa nọ ekenekwa mmadụ ncha. Sorry, I came in late to the meeting. I was rushing. I had some other thing going on, so but I was preparing for this and came in when Chinwoza was speaking. So I get some of the information, but not completely. I had Ojinaka speak, and it seems like we all directing our discussions pretty much towards the same idea that it has to do with authority and it has to do with governance. Now, my angle on this is, and I ask the question, Onye Nwe Obodo, how did that word even start? And how did that idea even come to be? If you look in Onitsha history, they tell the history and retell it all the time that Onitsha people came from running away from the war in Benin. Some stopped in different places and eventually some crossed over. And when they crossed over, they met some people who received them, performed certain rites with them, and told them, you go upland and live. And whatever you can do, there's also people there, please chase them away and you can have the land up there. Now, as a Chim, I never crossed the River Niger to the eastern part. Now, nobody has really explained why, even though they say he died on the other side of the bank. But we should remember that in those days, every king has a big territory. There is a message or some history, it could be anecdotal or actually confirmed, that the Oba of Benin used to once a year send people to the River Niger to bring water to him. Just a way to show his area of control. Okay, this is how they did it then. And we know that the Ata of Igala at the time owned and controlled all this riverine area, Bariam, all these areas, all the way to Abo, you know. So my question is, if there was no king that crossed over to the other side, and we started this term Onye Nwe Obodo, who are we really referring to? There has to be somebody we're referring to even start that, to conduct that language. So if you look at it, I think we're all pretty much pointing a finger 3 to 2 to the direction that the Mafia holds a bigger control or swagger when it comes to Onye Nwe Obodo. Because if you look in certain sectors like Olu people, they call Onye Nwe Obodo the Mafia Ata, who is supposed to be the king of the Gala people. So there must be some connection to that started that language for people to even assume it and begin to use it in the term we use it today. Like Ojinaka said, culture changes. And as they change, you adapt and you make those adjustments. So it is likely that now people are ascribe it to the Obi of Onitsha, okay, because he's the king of Onitsha and wields a lot of power. But we have to be specific when we're trying to deal with history, regardless of how much we dilute it, but we have to also be clear on where does something start and where is it today? You know, like the Omo used to be there and had power. We don't have Omos anymore. Does not mean we can't have one, but as those things change, we adapt to it. You know, so that's my little addition I want to add to it. So if we're saying these things, let's question how did it even start for us to get to where we are today with our own interpretations. You know.
Okay, thank you, Uncle. That was a good point that you added on the crossing of Ezechima, and before he could officially cross over the river, he died. So he technically wasn't the overall Obi of Onitsha. And Onye Nwe Obodo, the phrase, you know, goes back further and further around that time as well. So yeah, that was a good point. Does anybody want to add to what he said? Comment on what he said, on what Bajay just said.
Yeah, yeah, I have a comment. My comment is this. If you are reconstructing history, this is an event that took place in the 15th century. Sorry, 16th century, 1504 or 1505. At the time of crossing River Niger into Onitsha land, where they met the Oze people. There is no way you can trace or reconstruct with historical evidence that the first time the word was used, Onye Nwe Obodo, that they were not talking about the war, the Chima drove those people to Nkwele Zunaka. In recognition of that defeat, that prowess, the King of Onitsha was given that name, Onye Nwe Obodo, a job well done. Historically, I want to detach it from the Gala Kingdom, because the attack of Igala that time was controlling the upper and the lower Niger, right? And that time, the Olus, who were settlers at the lower Niger, couldn't have been talking about Obodo. Even the time they ferried the Umuzekima across, when they started even trying to settle down and engaging in the first war within the people. What I'm trying to say that let's remove, because there's no way we can have that historical evidence to say that that concept or phrase, Onye Nwe Obodo, probably could be backdated from the time of Igala. But rather from the time of the war, which makes sense that to show some accolade, also encomiums on the prowess, the war that they won. I think that was the time that concept was first time used to praise their king. Yes.
All right. Corollary to this argument he just made, which I think is a plausible one. Now, if it is true, then we shouldn't ascribe that name to Muafia in any way, because he has no participation in this history just presented. So he should not even, it's like Onitsha people have Olaga, have Ijela and all those things. Why is it particularly we ascribe it to this one, who never participated during the war of Oze, but was existing before then? So if you look at it, there are some area there's a gap that has not been explained based on this history presented, and any other thing that we have said so far, because if he was not there during the time of this conflict, so why do we then ascribe this to him particularly when we have other masquerades that can also claim the same right?
Thank you. Very good question. Following what Ojinaka explained earlier, that the cultural and traditional life of a people is continue to evolve, is dynamic. At the time, Muafia, by the Olu people, came to play a role in Onitsha society. Maybe along the line, the community start perceiving the supremacy among other masquerades, that Muafia has a magical wand. Because I remember as Ndiolu, if you look at the Muafia on the top, that is aloe. It's called aloe. That aloe has some magical and mystical power from the attack of Igala. I'm very convinced on that.
That is true.
And that is why when the Muafia use that aloe on something, that is finality. Finality, absolute. You don't question, don't debate. So maybe the people start perceiving this new authority from Muafia. The people here and there, they say, this is Onye Nwe Obodo. Maybe part of people's perception later when the culture will start evolving and integrated by the Igala people and Umuzekima.
Now, maybe that's...
Can I add something real quick? Just real quick.
Yeah.
Because I think Padia raised a very, very good question. And it's a funny thing that actually, as we're speaking, I'm actually looking at your book. By the way, I don't know how many of you know this. Chinwozo studied African history. I believe his degree was in African history. And he's written a couple of books. The last book he actually wrote was actually about Onitsha history, where he traces as part of it to actually Egypt and Middle East and all that stuff. And so I think in the mix, I think part of what I think Paji was trying to capture is that when I was talking about Onitsha culture evolving, you have to remember when talking about Onye Nwe Obodo, Eze Chima was not a king. Eze Chima was not a king. When we came, he was not a king. He was just a leader. Onitsha didn't have kingship. Kingship was established after we came. He did not come leading our people from Benin as a king. We didn't have a king. So even the leader, the person who supposedly established Onitsha, was not even a king. So when we say Eze Chima, Chima was not a king at the beginning, right? And so this concept is not historical. You can't trace the Onye Nwe Obodo to some historical origin of Onitsha. That's my point about evolution, right? And the concept has a distribution across Onitsha culture, as I was saying. For example, there's some things that Mmuo can do that the king cannot do. The king cannot come to, if a husband and a wife are having an issue, having a problem, and the marriage is over, let's just say the wife is just a troublesome person, troublesome woman, cheats on the husband, and the man decides, I've had enough. I do not want to marry this woman anymore. And the family support that. There's all kinds of ways to resolve that marriage. The woman can simply pack her stuff and go home if she chooses to. The man can, decide to, pack the things and take it back to the wife's family or all kinds of. But none of that really dissolves a marriage. But Mmuo Ogonogo is the only entity that actually can dissolve the marriage and give it finality. Igwe cannot do that. Mmuo Ogonogo can step in and say, it's over, and it's over, right? So the point I was making a long ago that Abogidi cannot do anything to Mmuo Ogonogo, but Mmuo Ogonogo could do something to Abogidi. In the sense that, as someone said that, if like Chimoza was saying, if we have a king that's not, living up to expectations and violating our cultural rules and policies, and as happened with the previous king, Mmuo Ogonogo can go and sit on the throne, and that's the end of that. That's the end of that kingdom, right? But nobody can do anything to Mmuo Ogonogo. So by power structure, if you look at what Mmuo Ogonogo can do, what the king can do, what each entity can do, you begin to look at what each can do. You begin to figure who has more power, so to speak. You begin to kind of declare to you what the concept is in terms of Onye Nwe Obodo. Because if you say, okay, let's assign power to each entity, let's assign power to Abogidi, let's assign power to Onitsha, let's assign power to Mmuo Ogonogo, and begin to see who can do what in that dynamic. It gives you a different impression about the concept of Onye Nwe Obodo. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yeah.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Yeah. And to add to what you just said, we in Onitsha are known for adulterating anything. Okay, even people's names, the culture itself, and make it up to whatever we think it's what we want it to be. A good example now, we've been speaking all along and we keep saying Abogidi, Abogidi, Abogidi. Onitsha kings are Obi. Onitsha, Nechi Obi. Okay? Now, the names we give them, these are names that the Ndichume and all this high ranking used to greet them are Abogidi, Akenyikale, and the rest of them that we know. Okay? Now, we now say, oh, Abogidi this, Abogidi that, Abogidi that. I don't remember when Okosi was alive. People call, oh, Abogidi Okosi. They used to say Obi Okosi, Obi Ofala, Obi Akazwa. Now we say, oh, Abogidi, Abogidi, as if on its title is Abogidi. These are the adulterations we give to things and take away the true meaning of it when we forget where or what caused that entity to initially to exist. So these adulterations, once they come in, people try to explain them in Onitsha culture that this is how we do it, this is how it is. Like they told us, when that can never become king, It's changed now. Tomorrow they say, oh, when so I think our history is always been, I don't know how to put it, manipulated in a way that it just suits certain people a certain way. And they try to explain it away as if they have all the facts to whatever arguments that you're making, But I still believe that if our culture and our history is true, if I come into your territory and meet you, and you receive me, and you entertain me, and welcome me, I will see you as a resident of that area and the owner of that property that I came to visit you in, unless you prove otherwise. So we have to kind of try to remember what has happened in our history, how things have changed.
But you want, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to tell you something before I forget. You can continue, okay? Because I just want to make it a point you made, because you really captured a very good point. So don't lose your train of thought. Use my example to continue what you're saying, actually, because I just want to make sure, okay, about how adulteration takes place. Just one example quickly that we can all remember that just is very recent to make your point. Great point. The way somebody becomes an indigenous citizen is that Omuna will accept you. And there's many ways women accept you, right?
Yes.
Maybe you come to visit the Omuna, maybe you come to work with the Omuna, maybe you come to serve the Omuna, whatever route you've taken to come in. After some time, Omuna will see you as part of them and accept you. You become that family and that clan and an indigenous. That's the way it works. No dispute about that. Now, in the recent history with the Abwim issue, for example, all right, a wrinkle was thrown in now that might not become a way to do it if we're not careful. For example, all of a sudden, we decided that to be a citizen, Abogidi can now invite you to come Polia Isiani, and for him to accept you, that makes you a citizen. That happened in Abwim issue, right? So if the next king decides that I have the power to make someone a citizen, and I confer residency on you, by the time we have 2 generations, that becomes the way it's done now, right? But that's not the history of Onitsha. But one king has done it, and nobody opposed it. As far as I know, nobody opposed it. It was accepted as normal because Ndiche were there when he was doing it, and they all accepted it. No Ndiche got up and said, hey, Onyisi, you can't do this. So they all sat there and watched him, and they all participated in him conferring his residency on a citizen. And it wasn't opposed by anyone. So it's now become part of our tradition and culture now. The next king decides, okay, I'll confer status on somebody because somebody did it last generation. By the time you and I are dead, our kids come up, it becomes a custom now.
Yes.
You see, so that's the point you're making. I just want to throw this as a good example that we can all relate to today.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. See, there's a lot that has gone away. Onitsha culture and history is so rich. There is a lot that has gone away. Now, somebody was asking earlier about this Onye Ogonogo. I just want to touch on just briefly. And again, to buttress some of what you just said. It used to be after the king is installed, he will go to Onitsha. There's a special chalk we have. They'll perform the rites, bless Onitsha, do everything they do, present him to Onitsha, and he'll live there and go and Zonyo na Mili. After that, he's completed his process. Can anybody tell me when the last time that was done?
Say that again.
No, as a Chisie or Jen Onitsha. I go say Aliani. Then he'll go just on his own a million almost go.
Yes.
And this,
Last
time Emiliana Ibazwa.
Yes.
Yes.
Even Niche and Amelia, Oga, one okay, Amelia.
Okay.
I just open a million.
And that and the question, why just on your Mila? What does that signify then?
That I can explain.
What I go? So if we go see about that na imezugo, because milli blind Bundi Onitsha is very important to us. Okay. And imesirani ani ipojiso anya kwuni ipochanya ipochago nwa ya ara adike mayinzu.
This one you're right, because that was Oga Amachi Nichi. This is a very final thing, man. That was a finale. After that, it's done.
It's a big thing.
Yeah, that was a finale.
You know, so some people are not doing these things and HS, but those are the variations and the changes I need to go through. And sometimes we forget the origin of our culture, you know.
But yes, sorry, everyone can miss the last point is the significance of it on Yokuna Milia. So, can you mean? What does that mean?
O mean ni mezuko ifenwe ifrop dika ogi chilozo. Ijala afia ozo.
Yeah.
Ijese afia ozo. Obli abu na ichizuko umwanyi zuzi ali ya afia. Imesi gifenwe leme. Koleko yasa. Ewatago. Mani ichi dika ndi ichie na umu ifa anuwa. The finally, iji we completed the process of ijagazo nyokona mili. Ibule egu, dulnibunu, ilu ekwusi, agosi aliyani. Ụfọdụ bụla ọbụlụ gbogbo ewelu nzu anyị iwele eje na mmiri zonye ụkwụ izo nra n'ụkwụ ichizugo.
No,
ọ dị ka nke nwa ije ka akpọ ifeji ọkụ iru is the same process. Ịghọtago otu ọzọ abụ onye chili ọzọ dịka tata ichi ikpokọ mmụọ ma ịkpọrọ ifeji ọkụ iru ime ikpokọ mmụọ.
Okay.
Ịghọtago?
Okay.
That one no, because
Uncle,
I want to make one statement.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Go ahead, Uncle.
Yeah. The culture now evolve is okay, but let's not forget while we are doing some of these things that the young ones know say the origin of the culture. When is their time? Yeah, nobody stood up and defended some of the old culture, like Ojinaka said. But these kids can go back and change those things if they know, if they believe that what the origin of the culture when Onitsha was created will work better for them. I think they can go. So I think what we're doing is a good thing. Maybe somebody has changed it and nobody fought him. But at least if the younger ones know the origin and they see that the first ideas will work better among all of them, they have the choice to revert back to that. That's just one comment. They have that choice to go back and redo it. They will not. It's not a must that they will continue from what we showed them. They can go back and adjust it. They have that decision to make too.
Yeah, Uncle, I'm glad you actually said that because I was just thinking about that when Bajia was talking. When there's like Ojinaka said earlier, like cultures, it changes and people adapt and things, kind of shift around. And I was thinking about the time when I read about Obi, I think it was the first Obi of Onitsha, and his shift with to merge Onitsha culture with Catholicism and stuff like that when the Catholics came to Nigeria, and how when he was becoming Obi, there were certain like rights and duties that he didn't do because of his newfound faith within the church. Also with the Yambalanze and also title. I'm not really sure if they still do it, but I know one thing that they do that I haven't seen a lot of new initiates do is when you take Oza, and I think it's before the Machana Oza, you'll do something with your village specifically, and you'll go into your village and you'll kneel down in front of, I think it's called the Ani. It's like a ancestral like shrine that's in the village, and I saw one person do it within this age, but the last time I really saw it done was my grandfather. When my grandfather did also in like the 60s, the 70s. There's a picture of him doing it. And my dad did it, but he didn't do it like how my father did it, because the distance between where he did also title, he didn't do also title in the village. He did the also title at like my house, which is in the village. So the distance between the house and the village was pretty far. So they did like a simulation imitation. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add it about the shifts and changes and of
New,
culture and the stuff that kind of changes and adapts to the new
Last
way
one I think is
way of
actually
life.
I'm done with myself. Sorry. No, that's
If you can hear you, you're having a conversation on the side. Can you mute yourself?
sorry.
Yeah, I just muted him. But yeah, I was just to add what you guys was talking about with shifts in culture and what Uncle Anemaka just said. Yeah, it's good to tell them the origin, to say the origins and say talk about stuff that we don't even stuff that we really don't do today, to kind of give the new age like a choice to see if the old stuff works, or if the new stuff is okay, or even if you want to change up the new stuff and as they move forward in life.
Let me, Chichu, the thing that I think what Kwaji, I believe it was Kwaji Kwanto that was talking about. Kwaji Kwanto was, I think, I didn't see the name, but I
Yeah.
think the voice, yeah. He was talking about, and I think he makes a good point about the part of the idea of understanding history is that if there's all these things that violate our history, or and then people can go back and recreate, or re-entry that the way it used to be. The problem is that once someone contradicts history, once there's a violation of history, and I use that word loosely, if it's not challenged at that time it happened, um, it becomes routine. And so that's why when things change in history, it sort of continues. Because unless someone says, like an example I gave, if someone stood up and said, Kambiakono, is this is not proper. But what we have now is that we live in a sort of in an era where, for whatever reason, people sort of just um, they'll know something is wrong. They'll know something is not proper. They'll know something is not right. They'll know it. But I don't know if it's a lack of interest. I don't know if it's sort of fear. I don't know what it is. But for some reason, people just sort of go along with it. You can look at Onitsha and see what's going on now in Onitsha today. You can see what's going on. People know there's some things that are going on. And I think this was really exposed with this Abun's issue, where you can have people in Abalanze who are leading this fellow to go and do this. And there are Balanza members who know it's wrong. But once you give them a sack of money, that's it. Just drop a sack of money on their doorstep. They'll tell you this never happened in Onitsha before. That's all it takes to get people to look the other way and have the culture, So it's difficult to put that, because it's not that people don't know. People know that these things are not. They will tell you. But I say, what can so so it's difficult, it's difficult that culture is a commercial entity, it's a product, people have to buy and sell, and that's unfortunate. That's the way it is. Culture is an entity, and people buy and sell culture, and as long as that's the frame of thinking, then culture become commercialized, commercialized culture.
Yeah. I would just like to
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the point you made and the one Chuchu made is important. You know, culture changes and people change. But sometimes it depends on the people you have in that culture that will determine the kind of culture you really have. Some are very eminent with the culture and want to remain that way. Some are just blow by the wind, whatever comes they take, you know, hopefully they get something out of it. When you mentioned, you know, the changes and the Agwem thing and all the other things that are happening, and you don't know if it's fear, if you don't know if it's because of money, you know, I think part of it is that Onitsha people, we used to have very brave people. Not too many. Most of them are not brave, I can tell you that. But we had a few brave people. If this had happened under somebody like Ono Wanatogo and Odumbanefo, they would speak up. Ogene Nwokedi too, they would speak up, okay? But today, we don't have men of metal. We don't have men that are brave. And in Onitsha culture, if you speak the truth because you see something wrong, you get in trouble. You know that. So I think that's why people are very afraid to speak up when they see something going wrong. To go back to what Chuchu was talking about, Isebulani, that's what they call it, Chuchu. That's to go and kneel at the Ani. Every village in Onitsha has an Ani. The Ani is a way that when they came in their own area, if they were moving around and they got to Umikem and stopped there, and their forefathers stopped there, that place where they live, they put an oracle there, and that oracle is their Ani, meaning that this is where they belong, this is where they started, and this is where they will always be. That's why you see generations upon generations, they go back to that same Ani that their forefathers built for them. Now, because of the change in culture or change in environment, which is changing the culture, things are now happening different from how it used to be. In the olden days, you took your other title in the Ilo, that's the village square. Many times the Ani is not too far from there. You finish your title, you walk over, your job will take you there, you go and kneel to your Ani, you know, do your ceremonies there, and you come out and finish. Now, people are doing their ceremonies like your dad did in a remote area from the Ani. So now they're not able to go there and complete the process the way it's supposed to be done by our culture. But there's another thing that caused some of this behavior. If you notice, a lot of people now are Christians. A lot of people go to church now. Particularly, let me talk about what I know, the Catholic Church. Part of their beef against also Onitsha was that they go and kneel at the Ani. And they don't want their Christian brothers to go and kneel at the Ani because they think it's pagan worshiping or whatever. So because of that, some of these people are actually delighted not to have to go to their Ani and kneel there and perform their ceremony like they used to do. So you see a change now, forced by change in behavior, forced by change in what I call allegiance, because now it shows that they are not Christians, even though they are taking the Ozo title. They want to maintain their Christianship, and for that reason, they are now bending the rules a little bit to suit those requirements. So those are the things that cause the culture to change, and it's changing all the time. And after a while, you will now forget that this is all part of the culture, and somebody will not interpret it in a different way. And that's what we're seeing today, you know.
But let me give you an example. What you just said. I got into an argument with someone just a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about a kingship. Just to give an example, that's what I'm making is that culture is very interesting. And we're saying, you know, about the rotation of kingships among the villages that can actually become kings. We know there's some villages that, you know, like Obi, where I'm from, and some villages that can never be kings. So we're talking about rotation. And so I was telling this person, so when this ends, this kingship ends, he rotates to Okebnabo. That's, you know,
Okay, now.
Yeah, now. And I said, I was saying to this person, so who do you see in your village? Okay, now who do you see as a potential candidate for when it comes to your clan next time around? So and she said, well, I don't know. I said, well, look around. Who think is capable? Like if tomorrow, God forbid, something happens and it's now your turn, who would you like to see become the next king? And I thought and thought and thought and thought. I said, geez, you're right. I haven't thought about that. I don't know. So I said, well, let me throw a name at you. So I threw a name at him from Wabab. And the first thing he said to me was, Manochi Rozon. So I said, what does that have to do with it? He goes, it can't be a king, Gochirozo. I said, Ichiozo has nothing to do with being a king. You can be a king without Ichiozo. Oh, no. He argued with me for 5. I let him argue for 5 minutes. I finally said to him, do you know that even in your village, there's a king of Onitsha from the village that didn't Chiozo? He said, no. I said, Samuel Kosi Echirozo. Obi Samuel Kosi Echirozo. I can't jack me Obi Sami. I said, go to your village and check.
That's all you, bro.
That's all you watch it also. Was it oh, really? Yeah, you can be a good. But you see how history changes?
Mm-hmm.
So he has this impression that somehow you have to be balanced to be Obi of Onitsha, which is not true.
It's not true.
He can be Obi of Onitsha without being balanced. And it happened in his own village. He didn't even know that Obi Oko, Samuel Kosi was not even a balanced member. His brother was, but Samuel Kosi Echiro also, you know. Obi Oyibo, yes, Obi Oyibo. Some Obi Sami Kana, Obi Sami. But that's so. See, history. So I get my point. I'm making is that if people don't know, also don't know history, it's difficult to challenge history. That's my point. So when people sit down and watch what's going on and don't challenge it, it's not because they don't want to. One thing is that sometimes they know, but they're afraid to challenge. Sometimes they don't even know the history to challenge it. That's my point.
Yeah.
So when you were saying about Anatog and those are people who know history who will say, no, that's not the way it's done. Odu will tell you, no, that's not the way it's done. But many of these people who are red caps have no idea of history. Look at them. They have no idea of history. So to even say challenge what? What do they know they'll challenge? You know? That's a problem too. Chiwas, am I not right?
Remember,
you're right.
Right. You know? How can you challenge what you don't know?
You know, you're right.
I think it brings up my point that let these people know so that they can decide on if they're going to revolve. It revolves, like you were saying, Ojinaga. You're 100% right. You have to know before you claim, you challenge something. You have to have a knowledge of it. Yeah. So if these people know some of these things, they are going to, like fashion revolves. You used to wear bongo far back. You used to wear tight. The tight is back again. But if they didn't, we never wore tight. It might not come back. So I think what you're saying is right. They need to know, and that way they can challenge. If they don't know, then there's nothing to challenge.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
So, Badje Quento, how can you say, as the nobody did a case, and it's a known fact, very clear to everybody, and it was brought up, introduced, and they went through the process and everything under the watch of everybody. Then you're telling me that why was it not challenged? Is it because the whole people under their watch did not know anything about Obendida and Enendo? Well, was it new?
Can I add Chinwaza Kanza and Quentin Bajano now Kwagaza? Odumbani challenged it, okay? That's why they are falling out till today. Because there are people that see things and understand what is going on. But it takes courage. Like I said, if you come out and speak the truth, you get in trouble, okay? Now, with what is happening, you're not going to tell me that amongst all the Ndiche now in Onitsha, that they don't have family members that say, hey, this Abumi issue is not right, so I don't think you guys should support this, or that they haven't heard it. But they go in there because they don't have the courage. They are not going to say, listen, I find this a problem. I don't think I'm going to support this. Now, what it means is that person is now willing to sever himself from them. And in order to avoid that, he keeps his mouth shut. Okay, they know the facts. I mean, if you know the facts, how come they don't know the facts? You know? So the point is just behavior and the fact that people want to be coddled in a certain way and they're afraid of losing certain privileges because if they say it, you know, it happens all the time, you know? So they do know. It's just that when you speak up, there might be consequences and nobody's going to back you up. Who's going to back you up, you know?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay. You know that, let me just start first of all that any culture that is not dynamic will come to die. We all know that, but the dynamism must be in sync with reality. It's the way I see it. And yes, we have ways we have been doing things that is the originality, we all know, and some of us don't know. It's just like what Ojinaka just mentioned, how Samokosi was not even a titled man. But if you poll 90% of Mmuo Onitsha today, they will tell you that Nobunichirozo, you cannot be the king. And it is a concrete knowledge that has propagated in this generation. But history is so strong and teaches us a lot. And I will also mention that Ojinaka Bronichi, so he can express himself very well. Mana oda. Onwalo oto gesi express onwe. Then you'll be. This is one of the problems that is propagating in our community. Ifeka make a point of duty to be taking us back in Anderson, where 2 or 3 Ndiche during the era of Babiasika or so disagreed with the king and absolutely disagreed with the king. So these 2 men Ndichume stood alone while the other Ndichume stood with the king. They still made it until the resolution. They stood their grounds, which is meant to correct some of the things that some individuals who don't know comes to know, and they stand for what the truth is supposed to be. That's not happening today because of the simple fact that either you are part of it or you're not part of it. If you're not part of it, then you're against it. And so many times when Baje is saying people don't stand for the truth, there are repercussions for standing for the truth. That is one of the problems that when you get to Onitsha and you want to discuss some of these things, we're in diaspora, and I'm sure this is being taped. And everybody worldwide may see this no matter what. But whatever you say, you have to be careful in what you're saying, only because somebody may interpret it to be something else, but it's not what you mean. And there is where the whole issue lies. The truth is always there. As in Andy Obendida, Ade Chieze. Only reason they on the ground Mbombo, Ejuese Navade Chieze. Obro Navade Chieze. Obendida bo Gilbuze Obendida. Oboza landida. Yabo Obendida. So no the Oboza Kababo. Oboza de Chieze. Makidi Nasina Obendida Ade Chieze. Then the Buzin the Obendida. Oboza landida Kavanaza. Onya Keji Bovo Obendida. Manon the Oboza Kababo. And as such, only even men within the era, now that is negated, nullified, those are situations. And Ojinaka mentioned something and said, somebody asked him, Obuna, if a me tata anwa, I can tell you, all these whole stories will resonate again. The dilemma will be thrown around. Mana, in reality, all the candidates, about 28 of them that were sorted by the committee, none of them were taken in that. Achebe from London. Achebe was not one of the original candidates, as I understood, and he ended up being. So now, if I got Niru, another insight for everyone. Thank you. So we can't sit and expect or point and say, Onya, Welive, Onya, de Gwam, Onya, Hukwavuma. Yet, Onwelindi Wule very well, I carry on to the next generation for what Onitsha needs. Today is Obi Achebe that is carrying us. And he was in London. He was not in Onitsha. He was not based in Onitsha before he was tapped to come back home and really do. And there are people that went to him in London to really convince him. It was not his original thoughts. The same way will happen when the time comes that we may not have Onyegabu Igwanyi for the future in Onitsha today or known to most people. Before Achebe Chipota, many of us that are very younger than him don't even know who he is. We never met him. We never spoke about him. The older people knew, the people of his age group knew, people that are just a little younger than him knew. London, some of them knew, some of them didn't know. Many of them didn't know Onitsha. I'm a wooden Onye until no surface here or where the So I don't know. We still have a long way to go in terms of all that we're discussing. And I do know that these discussions that we have may manifest great ideas and perspectives that can help us for the future.
Let me just
Thank you.
You're right about that example about Achebe in London. And I agree. I'll give you two other examples. The point I was making is not that when the time comes, we'll not find a candidate. Onitsha always has a way of finding someone. I'll give you an example. But the point I was making was that this person was from Gwam, and we're discussing about if it becomes your turn again to give us a king, who do you have in mind? And I will play out with names, and I tossed out a name that I thought was somebody who's dignified, integrity, and then his answer to me was Uchirozo. Yeah. I used that to make a point about how we don't even know what history is, because in his mind, that's Onitsha culture, is that Omnichirozo, Imabueze, which is not true. I'll give you two examples. In fact, the same process was the process that brought out Obi of Onitsha. He was a police officer, right? Same process brought out Kabwe was a railway worker. Nobody knew. They were not even in the radar.
That's right.
Not even in radar. And then when I brought him back from where he was working in railway, not work with Bonatia,
that's
he
right.
wasn't one of those people that came initial. Same thing, Onye was a police officer working his police, and they brought him back. So there's always a way of finding people where they are and bringing them back. So I say, but another question I was going to ask is that I think I saw some of this in Chi once, but I don't remember. One of the things that becomes a culture now is that now, if a candidate's mother, Onye Ogonogo cheers, which means we want you, both your dad is from Onitsha, obviously. They also want your mom to be from Onitsha. So I think about Onitsha Kanabo. Where did that start? When was that? When did that become the rule that for you to be a king, your mom, because that was what disqualified Enwezo, all right? And that was what disqualified my grandfather, Ebunike Sajim. Because my grandfather, no course he wants or less. On the other hand, 1 and 2, Dibia 1 and Dibia 2. I had 1 and 2 because I did cheer 2, only rotate. But I offer the first time I will course 1 or course 1 or course 2.
Yeah.
Back to okay. And because my grandfather, no course Ogo Okosi, Joko Shimo, what am I? No, Kebnabo, Bo Kosi, Welwe, Umazaroli. Now, what am my grandfather? Able to get near Bonya Saba. Or if you put a local and near Boya Saba. When I buy if I were there, in the meantime, one Kosi, some no officiate, no can officiate a balance I best. The Harding Commission with that Tianya, Nima Buku, was an if it is qualified on Yabona, near Onitsha. No, Indian Onitsha. If your mother is not from Onitsha, you cannot be a king. So, so the Harding Commission will rule. I was in they told you about the okay, bring another candidate since this person doesn't qualify. And they want to say, no, this is who we want. If you don't want him, then we'll give up our turn. This is who we want. We want this person to be king. And they refused to bring another candidate. So the Harding Commission ruled in that case, let it go back to Okeblabo. And they brought us some Okosi 2, became Okosi 2. That's it, became Okosi 2. Okay. Listen to this. So, but here's the question. And it's something with Mwezo and Nsugbe. Okay. Where did that start? Where did that idea that if your mother is just your how culture evolves, if your mother is not from a child, you cannot be a king? Can anybody tell a bit about the history about that?
Ojinaka, before anybody can mention that, realize that your maternal grandfather that you're talking about, he didn't say that he was not qualified because no Bonyo Bandida. Makana Ebunike Bandida.
Yes, correct.
He is because of maternal, not because no Bonyo Bandida.
Yes.
So this controversy of Nandia Bandida Chieze is not applicable at that time.
Yes.
We're still talking about.
Yes.
Go ahead for the question.
Yeah,
the question is I was going to explain to. So where did that policy or correctional rule, whatever it is you want to call it, where did that start? I just want to show how culture changes. Where did that start that if your mother is not from nature, you cannot be a king? Where did that start?
Yeah, Ojinaka, I want to make a very good point. Because our brothers here, my wife's grandfather too, Okwu Igwe, Nyawa Jekwaziludo, Nyabwendeda Kobo. So that goes to what we said earlier, how Onitsha people manipulate their history to favor whomever they want to favor. I want to Jeju, you know, and I think, you know, I've been missing a little bit of my processes here. But these things are changing because of the culture and the way the new generation of people are coming along. Ejolo say, but who and why ages and there when the daddy cheers. Again, this is a history before your grandfather and before Kosa. And that history, when if and the band endo, Obunulut and if Jason and there when the daddy cheers because on the band, yeah, the Akoko Mazeli na the other side of Obwendida. Okay. They did certain things, Mado, Hebana Zoeze. And in that process, in the Onitsha, they moved on Unubulacho, and for that reason, I was also. So, if I want, this Yakagasina, I guess Papa Fanao. But look at the time when that happened, and when Sajim, Juejem, is you see the time. In other words, Sajim's affair is more recent than Oge Fanuame. Okay? So, why shouldn't Sajim have the right to be Pweze? Because on your when the Dakoba and Achokob less enough, because Namia Bronyonica. So, which means he would have been qualified to be a king.
But only water. Maybe I'm wrong. Someone can explain this to me. What you can do a particular faction.
That's the point making.
Right. Okay. Yeah. An end faction. Okay.
Yes. Side in Kefa. Yotago. Or side in India. Indian weapon. Kamalinze. Nibo Wowo. Chebefa. Okwosa. Akaka. India Diche.
Right.
What I go? So manabia, I need throw these words out there. Because how can I benefit on your boss? Because also people found a chairs.
Yeah, right. That's my point.
Yes, but all praise you.
Yes. But that's my point. Can you even join a job? On my even job, when we people, I like to use examples to flush out because what happens is that when people make points or it's always in the abstract. Our abstract scope is a theory. But in we key example where flush out or one mother anya even so can't you makana this policy when we people which culture changes by all kinds of reasons. Number one, I said it earlier, all the dynamic, people change. My culture may change because now, remember our culture is also political. That's what people forget. Culture is also politics, right? And even the politics, now, even the gas water for Buna and get away with it, in men, or my own interest. No benefit in some things. He decided no gonna get a boy on a chance, no gonna confirm. Whatever it is, so politics is even in a culture of politics, culture of politics also. Una must equal na as a rolly. Ebe can you see?
Egala.
Can you see? Okay. Me boy gala. And this already precede the Ebunike na West and Dianine. Can you put solution and cable? Because na neighbor answer. As a neighbor on gala.
There's a reason though.
Yeah.
And if I'm feel the reason, but because in Onitsha culture and history, people really need to pay attention to certain nuances, not the major story. And or because now, even if I'm when they came. Bondi Onitsha across the river, I say across the river, and they want to receive if and they want to entertain if and come on. You see, they like to change the story from what the true context is. That's the point I was making. Onitsha, Negala have had a relationship for a long time. Ibaba also in a Baganebi Malumado. So, as they are rolling, Ndị Onitsha were willing to accept his mother being an Igala woman than a neighbor Onye Okija, Onye Ifene, because no Ghana bo Imano for the Ogi Chienez and Ne Yiga Chupunde in Guinea maybe. Number one. Number two, Bana Fana Tueguna, Opulo na Onya Jege HCS, Nieblo Onye Obodo. Now, Ogane favor that people, money make a decision, just like what we have here in America, as to emolument clauses, no more. So that same thing was obtaining in Onitsha, okay? And born about if MSU to no dekeze, Ewaya, Abia Messia, Ebulisia Zunu, where now Budofa, Idu goes in a family Luno. Okay? Now, a little bit of aside in Kabasangebo Jinaka. Your grandfather Busajim, Imanon with a lot of land in Oze. On a lot of land on when Ozaraka, half of Onitsha. Okay? Obulu no oge ndị ọzọ onwe ndị fana lọgụ obodo ọzọ anụsịa ndị ọzọ ndị obodo a melie ọzọ bulu isi onye nnukwu onye dike n'obodo fa bulu isi na sergeant as police officer jalaba we negotiate kwata ndị a bulu isi nwoke abunye ke we amalo significance of some of these things. I'm using this as an example. O we bulu isi the man buchi alụ ndị ọzọ yes, and ndị ọzọ wee were anyị wee kwụọ anyị ụgwọ nya ife njikwa say your grandfather nwere anyị raka half of Onitsha n'ọzọ. You don't know that, do you?
No,
okay, it's a fact. So you're right. Nye bụ onye Igala. N'onye onye Nsugbo. You reject onye Nsugbo wala onye Igala. So there's a reason for it.
You're right.
Arika ndị okenye ezulu one show the youth. It's becoming very interesting, man. The conduct ask the youth.
No, Uncle. This is good. This is what this is what
that's what he wants.
Yeah, this is what
explain something to the youth.
Yeah, this is good. This is good content.
This is good material. I wanted to add, when it comes to culture and history, sometimes, well, sometimes we got to look at it from the time, as opposed to looking at history from the lenses that we have now. You know, and what I mean by that is, most of the reasons why most of these cultures, these customs and traditions have changed and or erased, and has created conflict between the community, is because nobody had the means and the materials to, properly, document most of this stuff to fact. You know, there may be a bunch of customs and traditions that were started on each other that we probably don't even know that used to happen in the 1600s or the 1700s. So, and those times, they're document books and photographs and videos. Well, maybe books, but photographs and videos, and just other stuff about um documentation wasn't that, the first thing on in mind. And on top of that, you got to see, their way of life. They probably didn't see them on each other. People at that time probably didn't see their, you know Onitsha being as big as it is today, or even as big as it was in the 60s and the 70s. They probably didn't see it going any further than they saw it at the moment. So, telling their kids and telling the next generation about how their way of life probably wasn't, their number one priority. Their number one priority was maybe just, surviving. So that's how I feel like sometimes culture kind of, loses some of its, you know, customs and traditions, and also how, some cultures get watered down and they aren't as the same as it was back when, you know, it was the way of life, as opposed to it's just being celebrated today. Like Amalante, for example, as it was before. This is what people did for a living. Like they woke up and they were the priest of the village. That was their job in maybe the 17s or the 1800s. And now, they do also title just, as the significance of wealth. It's just to and remember to remember that they're from Onitsha. This is where I'm from.
CBS.
So yeah, I just wanted to add what that in. That's why, and one of the reasons why I started this podcast, so we could talk about these things and and have these sit downs and discussions. So later on afterwards, people can go back and listen to these things and hear what everybody here is saying, and hear what's in the room, so they know, like, okay, this happened before, or this is this, or that is this. So this is what Onitsha people do now, or this is what Onitsha people did before. It's sort of like a book, kind of, but like, voices and through media and through TV. So
Chuchu,
yeah.
I, I think that after you have reviewed this whole discussion, there'll be many more questions that comes up.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
created topics that you said you wanted some answers to that we're discussing today. And we moved to multiple different areas in this discussion. Now, you will condense it to have more questions that follow through to the discussion, and things that were all revealed that is not even part of your original plans of the discussion.
Yeah, I'm gonna use these, because I even thought of some stuff myself, and I'm what my plan was is, I know there are gonna be questions of people who just watch this on YouTube or listen to this. I'm just gonna make those. I'm gonna formulate, topics off of those questions that you could feed off of
Beautiful.
this
Yes.
first episode. into the
Yeah.
next episode. That way we'll have more we'll have topics that kind of connect both episodes and stay within the facility of Onitsha culture and customs and traditions. I already could think of topics. I already think of some topics that we'll have next episode, just off the strength of watching you guys, talk. So
Yep.
yeah. But I know we sort of did get off topic, but that's okay. That's what I expected. That way we have more. It's more. I feel like it's more full of content when you let people talk and discuss, and then what you get out of it is the magic of it, and how the lesson is what you get out of it, instead of just kind of staying the course. I feel like staying the course is kind of boring. It's more entertaining and more uplifting to see people just rip and run and just start talking, as long as they stay on topic, which we did. It was good.
So now we invite Ugo